My game is ugly, there's no getting around it. I have the default color Unity background, the player isn't even actually animated, it's just kind of bouncing around, and all the balls are just white squares. I need to fix this. But there's one issue, I'm a programmer. I'm developing this game. Its current project name is Project Seaborn, and it's an action RPG with a battle system that is a unique blend of turn-based combat and bullet hell dodging and attacking. Over the last 2 devlogs, I got the game to a state where you can currently have somewhat fun battles with the one enemy currently in the game, the slow roller. So the goal for the month of January is to make the game look presentable. Programmers like me aren't exactly known for our incredible animation and art skills, but I absolutely want to improve my art for this project. While I was making my last game, Couch Combat, I pretty much learned 3D modeling and animation from the ground up, and I think that the graphics of the game turned out pretty well, so I'm going to try to become proficient in the art of the pixels. Animation, characters, tile sets, I want to try to get a grasp of it all. So I'm beginning my journey in this video, but before I start this video, I just want to ask you to subscribe if you want to follow development of Project Seaborn, and a like or comment would also be very appreciated, as little things like that can help out my small channel in the YouTube algorithm. Thanks for watching, and let's start. When it comes to animation, there are a few things more essential than a walk cycle, and I mean, how hard can making one be? I want to keep animation minimum in the game right now, so I'll only make running animations for up, down, and to the side. And this side view looks really cursed. I think I'll just stick to up and down for now. Okay, it's in the game, but I think I prefer what it looks like with no animation. This looks really bad. I'm gonna come back to this later, as this is way harder than I anticipated. So instead of doing that, I decided to just make a new enemy. I only have one in the game right now, so I think it'll be fun to make another. The enemy that I made last devlog, the slow roller, is a pretty complicated enemy with a ton of different cards that it uses in its attack. And it's slow and only has ranged attacks, so I'm going to make a new, more aggressive enemy with a melee attack alongside a ranged one. Introducing the Dapper Snapper. I've had the idea for the Dapper Snapper enemy for a while, and I even have an old sprite for it. But the old sprite was pretty bad and didn't fit the style of the game, so I redid it. Now it's a lot easier to tell it's a crab with a top hat, and I think that it's pretty funny looking. Animation for this guy was pretty simple. He just scuttles around like a crab for his movement, although I made sure to make it bouncy with some hat movement. As for the attacks, in the ranged attack, he snaps his claw 3 times to shoot 3 bullets, and for the melee one, he charges up and then dashes at the player. This is the first melee attack in the game, so I had to lay the groundwork for how these would work in the code. I ended up settling on a system very similar to how knockback works in my code, where I can just apply a force in a certain direction. For the Dapper Snapper, it goes towards the player, but I could also combine this melee attack system with a normal bullet shooting attack for recoil from a weapon or maybe even a sidestepping attack. I can also change this enemy's contact damage whenever this attack is active, so I increased it for the Dapper Snapper's dash. And yeah, that's pretty much the Dapper Snapper all finished up. I think that it's a pretty fun enemy to fight against, as you have to constantly be on your toes and be able to dodge in time whenever he uses his melee attack. And when combined with the chaos of the slow roller enemy, battles can get difficult fast. But I think that's a good thing, as I want the battles to be pretty hard. Them being difficult will incentivize you to utilize the plan state attacks in the game, which makes it more difficult to play really aggressively in the battle state. But if you're skilled enough at bullet hells, you should still be able to get through the game just doing that. And while I was messing with the enemies, I decided to make them more satisfying to attack and kill. So I added a simple hurt animation in addition to the already existing hit flash, and I also created a corpse animation that plays whenever you kill an enemy. It took a while to get it looking right, but I think that it's pretty cool and it makes killing enemies a lot more fun. If you are interested in learning game development, then you might be interested in this video's sponsor, SNHU. SNHU has one of the largest accredited nonprofit online degree offerings in the country, and I want to talk to you about their game development program. In this program, you'll learn how to make realistic, dynamic gameplay experiences with game AI, game physics, 2D and 3D graphics, and interface design. And you'll also learn computer programming languages like C++, C#, and Java. And you'll learn 3D modeling and texturing with game art software. You'll learn how to research, develop, and contribute to advances and trends within the field of game programming, and courses are taught by faculty with real-world experience in the games industry. SNHU is radically affordable, and their online tuition rates are some of the lowest in the nation. Go to snhu.edu/levin, also linked in my description, to see what the current average annual salary for a programmer is, and to request free information about the program. Whenever you request information, a real person will hop on a call and discuss how the program can benefit you personally. Thank you so much to SNHU for sponsoring this video, and now back to the devlog. I decided to get back to making art for the game, starting with some environmental art. I think that I'm pretty decent at designing characters in pixel art, especially non-human ones like the enemies in this game. So those have mostly been a breeze for me to make and animate. The areas that I struggle in more are in more complex animation like run cycles and environmental art, and also making any sort of humanoid thing is quite difficult. So I'm going to try to improve myself a little bit here. I started by making a sand and water tile set. One thing that I noticed when looking for tile sets online was that repetition was key. You need patterns to make the tiles fit together and to reduce the amount of chaos whenever you look at it all. But you also need to avoid making these patterns stick out too much. It's a pretty difficult balancing act, but I think I ended up getting it pretty well, as I decided to apply this knowledge when making the sand. Despite the fact that the dots of darker tan in the tile were just randomly spread across it, these dots are the same for every tile, and so I think it makes it fit together all pretty well. This tile set also includes waves, as it is an ocean, so I had to figure out all the tiles that I needed for this. I messed around for a while until I could create a variety of shapes with the water tiles, but I don't want to spend tons of time placing down all these individual tiles when I'm making the game, so I'm going to be using Unity's auto tiling feature. An auto tile is basically a set of rules that you assign to tiles that makes them automatically pick which tile to place, allowing you to just paint them in like in Mario Maker. This is super time saving and not to mention really satisfying. Although auto tiles can be kind of confusing to set up, they are absolutely worth the time. But after making these water tiles and setting up the colliders for them, I decided to make some destructible objects. Games like Enter the Gungeon and Archvale have these, and it makes transversing just a lot more fun as you get to destroy a bunch of stuff. I implemented destructible objects by making a base sprite, making cut up versions of that sprite, and then enabling a particle system when you touch that object that pauses at the end, which leaves the piece on the ground. I'm not gonna lie, this effect doesn't look nearly as good as I hoped it would. I'm gonna come back to it in a future devlog, as it just lacks the fun and polish that the destructible objects in the games I mentioned earlier have, but I can't pinpoint the exact issue at the moment. If you guys have any suggestions for them, then be sure to mention them in the comment section. At this point, I briefly thought about going back to working on the player's movement animation, but I know that's gonna take a very long time to get right, so for now I'm just gonna finish up the environmental art first before I start on that monster of a task. I made another tile set. This time it's some grassy cliffs that serve as walls. I think their green adds some much needed color diversity to the scene. It took way more tiles this time to account for all the different versions that I need for this rule tile, but I think it looks good. I realized after making this that I should have made it much more autumn-like, as that's the theme for this area. Fall plus beach. I think that this is a unique combination that isn't really possible in real life, so I think that it might look good and memorable in a video game, but I kinda forgot to do it now, so I'll make it all autumn-y later. And to finish this all off, I made another darker color for the sand that I can add on to make paths and details. This was pretty simple to make, however what wasn't simple was animating the water. I made 4 frames of animation total, which means 4 times the amount of tiles are needed to finish this. And they all have to hook up seamlessly through all the animations. But through some careful pixeling, I got it all fitting together. I don't think that this environment is close to done, as I want to add more details, more variants, more fall, and also some new buildings and houses later on. But I think that it's a good start, and it certainly looks better than the void of blue. But now I have nowhere else to run. The main task that I've been putting off is approaching. I have to animate the run cycle. I decided to make the run cycle 8-directional. I think that this will make it look much more fluid and improve the feeling of transversal in combat. However, it will mean a lot more animation. I eventually determined that I would only have to animate 5 directions of movement, as I could flip all the east facing ones to make the west facing ones. But each direction needs 1 idle sprite and 8 running sprites, which is a very tall order. I plan on having 3 different characters, who each will need 45 sprites just for basic movement. I also really wanted to change their costumes for different jobs in the game, but I might have to reconsider doing that and just give them a hat or something, because that is a really tall order. But this first walk cycle will take by far the longest time to complete, as later on I can reuse and trace it in the future for the rest of the characters. But first I need to figure out how to draw a Liam facing in 5 different directions. In order to do this, I watched a few videos by Adam C. Eunice on YouTube. Using this as well as referencing a nice 8-directional base for standing allowed me to go from this very stiff pose to this new pose in all 5 directions, which I think looks much more expressive. Plus I gave him bigger shoes so he's much more drippy. But now came the hard part, animating all the different animations. And this took around 2 weeks to get done. That's mostly because I was busy with other things like Persona 5 on the Switch. And in reality, I only had about 5 days of solid work over that time. But the biggest challenge in creating this by far was getting the isometric perspectives of southeast and northeast. It's hard to change the perspective of an object when the object is only like 3 pixels big, but after a lot of work, I got run cycles that I am extremely happy with in all directions. Maybe some of these directions can use a bit more polish, especially for the shoes, which flop around a little bit too much, and maybe the hair could use a little bit more movement, but I'm happy with it for now. So I got it all implemented in the game. I had to overhaul the animation controller, but it looks really good in my opinion. I'm super happy with how it all turned out, but now I need to do this for the other 2 characters, which will take a while. Nevertheless, I also added some subtle touches within Unity. My game might be pixel art, but I'm not trying to emulate a retro style, and I am far from a purist when it comes to pixel size. So I added some squash and stretch for running, and some subtle scaling for breathing whenever idle as well. Finishing this all off, I want to make dashing look good. So I started by just making a dash animation in each direction. I just used the first frame of running in each direction, which was simple, but it looks pretty good. And then I made the player flash white and also squash and stretch in the direction that they are dashing in. Finally, I added some dust particles. First off, a few to normal running, which are just spawned in on a short timer whenever you are running. And these dust particles use object pulling, so they are eco-friendly. And also a big bunch of these dust particles are released behind you when you dash, and that makes it a much more satisfying dash. And that's about all I've accomplished over the past 2 months. I pretty much took a break from this project to work on my little Pokemon game and my big Amore video over December, so that's why I didn't release a devlog that month. But I'm back on track now. I plan on making some big improvements to the planned state of the game in the next devlog and really wrapping up the main loop of the battle system. And I'll also do some other stuff, so be sure to subscribe for that. Thank you once again for watching. Bye.